Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
Building on over 25 years of industry experience, Jennifer Sicilia is a visionary leader who champions inclusivity and out-of-the-box thinking, which have proven instrumental in making RYCOM a leader in the smart tech space. In this episode, Jennifer discusses with Nicola the evolution of RYCOM's services, the motivations of real estate owners to embrace smart tech adoption, the myth of job losses as innovation and automation increases, and the advances that we'll see in the next decade, and so much more. If you're passionate about real estate, then this episode is for you.
So a very warm welcome to you today, Jennifer, and thank you so much for joining me on our latest episode of the Real Estate Careers Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today, Nicola. I appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. So as smart cities continue to evolve, it's very clear that we need to make the most of information and communication technologies. And obviously real estate owners, they want to reduce operational costs, they want to improve occupant well-being, retain their tenants by improving service levels, and obviously meet their organizational sustainability goals as well. So hence this is all a very hot topic right now. And I'm just delighted to hear about your experiences and learn today from your insights and perspectives when it comes to smart buildings and technology solutions. So today, obviously we'll start with finding out a little bit more about who you are and what you do and who you work for and the value add that you're adding into our industry. But, let's just get straight into it here. So how did you get to where you are now as the GM and VP at RYCOM?
So I've been at RYCOM just over 20 years. And prior to joining the real estate side of the business, I actually had an opportunity to work with many of the financial institutions, large retailers, and air travel. And it was always around the networking and technology space. So I've been very familiar working with tech, data, people, and process for years. And it's actually a methodology we've refined in different industries. And so back in 2009, when I was offered the opportunity to join the real estate side of the RYCOM business, I had absolutely no experience in real estate, and I had no idea what I was stepping into. Back in 2009, the RYCOM team was very small that was servicing the real estate industry, and the main focus was around telecommunications. And so it was a great entry point into meeting a number of real estate organizations across the country. What became very interesting after a little while was that we saw a huge opportunity for technology and data adoption in the real estate industry, yet they were one of the slowest industries to adopt transformation and innovation around tech and data. And so while we saw an opportunity, we knew it was going to be a slow roll. So there was a lot of time, effort, and education, and many discussions with clients about that. And what we saw was a really siloed approach to an industry where other organizations adapted tech and data in a much more collaborative and partnership type environment. So as my time progressed, from 2009 onwards, we started to see an upside and real opportunity to inject data, technology, people, and process in real estate. And some of our clients, being early adopters in the industry, allowed us to start to see some progression and movement. So I'd say that's one contribution. The second part that's allowed me to get to this role, I really think, was the support of the owner of RYCOM, Casey Witkowitz, our previous CFO, Pat Mancuso, and I believe Demetrius Marshall, who we worked side by side for a number of years. They were huge supporters, and they gave us space to work together, to pursue opportunities, and really try to see what was possible. So having that internal support was key. I think, my ability to become the GM and VP now has, in addition, been I have an opportunity to work with some amazing people on our team that are passionate and care And there is a mutual respect and trust that we have with each other. And, being in this position, you sometimes have to make really difficult decisions during tough times. The organization may not understand why I've made or why the business has made a decision around this. However, there's this underlying trust that we really do have their best intentions and our clients' best intentions at heart. Another great reason is we have these amazing clients. We've built very solid and trusting relationships, and there's this desire and willingness to share experiences, to debate, to challenge each other, and we have achieved many successes and failures along the way. And our clients have had support in, the direction we've moved in. Part of it is also the expansion and growth we've had. We've been given the ability and accountability to expand our service offering. Today, RYCOM services our Canadian clients coast to coast. And that has allowed me to impact the culture within the organization, the hiring that we've done. And so I think all of these have helped contribute to that. And the one thing I think that's really important for anybody, because we all, at the end of the day, are leaders, is how have I challenged myself and how have I tried to push my own personal development so I can be a better person, I can be a better mother, a better partner, a better boss, and a better teammate. And I think all of those things wrapped up have helped me get to where I am today.
Just out of interest, what is the headcount now at RYCOM? You said it was just a few, obviously, when you joined the team. So what's the headcount now?
I did today from coast to coast, we're 90 RYCOM employees. So we've grown exponentially over the last several years.
And it's great to see a strong female leader sort of at the helm as well. So can you share a little bit more about what RYCOM does in the real estate sector and what sorts of clients that you deal with?
Sure, that's a great question. So maybe I'll start with the latter part. So when we look at the clients that we work with owners, owner-operators, and third-party property management companies within the real estate industry. And then we work pretty much with every building system vendor and every telecom service provider across the country. So you can start to see we work with a number of different organizations. What's interesting about what we do, and if we look at it through the lens of smart tech specifically, each client actually has a very different starting point. And what's really important that when we're working with any of these organizations is we really need to hone in on what is the problem we're trying to solve, or what is the outcome they are looking to achieve. The challenge the industry has is they start with technology first, as that is the ultimate solution. And from our perspective, tech is a piece of the solution, but we need to get down to the nitty-gritty to figure out, what's the right way of going about it. And so that's our starting point. From a RYCOM perspective, as I mentioned, we brought this methodology to the real estate industry that really focuses on technology, people, and process, because they are all intertwined. You cannot inject technology or a data platform into your organization without understanding what the implication is going to be from a people and process perspective. And so that's really where we start from. When we think about the services that RYCOM offers, and I think of sort of like our timeline of history, as I mentioned earlier, RYCOM began on specifically around the telecom riser management service. That was our entry point into the real estate industry. And so today we have many clients that want to build the foundation from a telecom perspective. Who's in my building? How do they mitigate risk? How do they generate revenue opportunities? And then we saw progression into them wanting to look at us providing converged networks and how do we monitor that infrastructure for them to keep them safe. We then expanded into the data intelligence side. And the reason for that is when we look at the other industries like the financial institutions, we look at air travel, we look at the automotive industry, they are using data to drive outcomes and decisions. And the real estate industry is no different.
So interesting how far we've come now.
Yes. And what's really interesting too is, when we look at how our services have evolved over time within the real estate industry, and I say this, in a very respectful way, but they certainly are laggers. Cybersecurity is another great example. It's not new. Cybersecurity has existed for decades. Anyone who's offered any type of network IT services, just like we have been doing with the banks for years, cyber has always been part of our practice and service delivery. And so, the real estate industry is in a position where they can actually learn from other industries if there's a willingness to step outside of the box.
Let's talk about some of the common goals that property owners have here in Canada. Can you share your insights there?
Definitely. So that's a great question. And to be frank, there's so many. I would say there definitely are some common goals that they share for organizations. And also for some of the real estate organizations that are a bit further ahead in their SMART journey, there's some others that come into play. So typically we find financial return is the number one issue that or ask that all of our clients have. They definitely want to focus on operational efficiency and savings. Environmental impact and ESG has become, a very hot topic within the industry, and their ability, to support and meet their sustainable needs. Tenant and guest comfort definitely comes up as one of the hot topics as well. Some of the other organizations will come in and want to talk about how do we impact, retaining and attracting great talent. And the smart tech space is allowing for all of these new opportunities. And so that's one particular area we see some growth as far as some of the common goals. The other area we see is clients want to start to be more proactive, especially the third-party property management companies, to their co-owners or owners. They want to show up with ideas and recommendations that they understand where the industry is going from a smart tech perspective. So that's certainly a goal we see of theirs. And then certainly last but not least is a request and ask for standards, guidelines, best practices around technology adoption, cybersecurity, how to best manage their data. So these are really some of the common asks and goals many of our clients ask for.
With new modern buildings, obviously you can design them with energy efficiency in mind by adding intelligence right from the beginning of the design phase through to the end of a building's, useful life. What about older buildings? I mean, obviously they're huge consumers of energy, and they've come under a lot of scrutiny as we all try to reduce carbon emissions. And obviously Toronto has a lot of older buildings. How much more difficult is it to retrofit older buildings with smart technology?
And so maybe I'll tackle the new first, because that's always an interesting area of conversation for me. And if done with a proper strategy and plan in place and some creativity, it certainly is the best time to deploy a smart strategy because you're working from scratch. The challenge the industry has is they're very traditional in their procurement practices. And you can't sometimes capture the true essence of a smart strategy in a tender. And most development organizations continue to depend on the same partners they have for decades. And so although some of those organizations have evolved or trying to evolve, there's certainly some missteps along the way. And so we've seen some, beautiful new properties go up across the country that have unfortunately spent so much money, however, have missed the mark on the true deliverable of what the client's intention was around smart. I would actually say if you look at the existing properties within Canada, and this is both on the commercial and retail space, we see existing properties that, again, don't have the same budget as a new development, however, have put together a much more wholesome and strategic plan around what they're looking to accomplish from an outcome perspective and how to most effectively use the money that's available to them. And so if their intention is to, I only have $1, how do we turn that dollar into $1.25? And so it's really about getting down into a very strategic and tactical plan about what do they want to accomplish, and based on what's available to them, what's sort of the most foundational thing we can get to get them on their journey.
I mean, with respect to people that own older buildings, I mean, there are concerns with introducing smart technology. So, you've quite rightly highlighted the expense, and then you've also got, technical knowledge. How hard is it to update and maintain that technology? Even the design of a building, I mean, older buildings, where are you going to fit this hardware? How do you help those individuals overcome those concerns?
As I mentioned, technology is not the leader in the conversation. It's really understanding what does a client want to achieve. And so maybe I can offer a couple of examples. If we look at, one of the government agencies that was looking to step into the smart space, their very specific starting point was wanting to reach their environmental and sustainability goals of 2030 and 2050. And so their entry point was really around how to leverage the data of their vintage building systems across Canada, and how could they leverage that data to drive energy efficiency, reduce their carbon footprint, drive operational savings. And so their starting point was all around data and their building automation systems. And that's one of the sort of the low-hanging fruits or entry points we see most organizations wanting to start if data is where they want to go. With another client as an example, they want to get even more grassroots. They want to understand, what are the telecom services I have in my building? Am I actually able to support the tenant amenities and services that my tenants need, but also that I need as a building operator? And so for some of our clients, we're actually looking at their telecom infrastructure, and do they have the services and support they need to attract the type of tenants that they're looking for. Another client, for example, what was really important to them was they wanted to build the foundational pieces or the plumbing in their properties, so over time they could connect those building systems, like their building automation, their metering, their lighting, their digital directories and Wi-Fi. And so for another client, what was important to them was about building converged networks in their property first, and ensuring that they were designed, implemented, and managed with best practices and standards from a remote monitoring perspective. And then we started to layer on the building system. So this is what I go back to. Every client, while they all have this vision of smart, their actual visions vary because of the type of client they are, the type of ownership, the type of tenants they currently have today, or the type of tenants they want to attract, the market pressures, their sustainability goals, and their culture plays a huge part of their ability to be successful and smart. And so we actually need to understand the organization and how they operate to then stitch together a strategy and tactical plan about how to help them achieve it. And collaboration and partnership is key. If you're treating your partners like a vendor, it's very rare you'll get that ultimate success or goal that you're looking to reach.
You know, I read something this morning about the Empire State Building. So that building was completed in 1931 and has been completely retrofitted with smart technology in the past decade, which has seen more than $4.5 million in energy savings every year. And there's been a 38% reduction in energy consumption. So I suppose that, you know, if the Empire State Building can improve, you know, that's obviously a very historical and iconic building, then there's hope for all old buildings.
Correct. But, you know, the industry is also challenged. It's, you know, from a RYCOM perspective, you know, we are technologists and data people at heart. So technology doesn't scare us. We actually get passionate and excited about it. Yet we have an industry that, you know, does a phenomenal job in building buildings and signing leases. And yet they are thrown, you know, they're reached out constantly by new technology that's continuing to pop up. And so when you have an industry that is completely overwhelmed by how much is showing up, you know, on their doorstep every day, many don't feel very comfortable in being able to evaluate technology. You know, it's unfortunately a recipe for disaster because you're asking people to make decisions about things they feel very uncomfortable about. And so perhaps another great example of how we're supporting our clients is, you know, we're taking those individuals that are non-technical and creating very tactical tools to allow them to become comfortable and embrace technology by creating tools that allow them to evaluate it in a non-technical way, to allow greater comfort in making the decisions they are, really sussing out what is a true solution in front of them versus what might be, you know, kind of half-baked solution. And also showing them how to create financial analysis and return to determine if it's a good solution for them or not.
I completely agree. An important benefit of smart buildings is the ability to collect a large amount of data that can then be analysed by decision makers in the sustainability field. Building owners can see how much energy is used in real time, how much it costs, and obviously this would lead to better data-driven decisions. So my question to you is, what are the opportunities and challenges with data in our industry?
There's certainly a lot of data around energy, and that's just really us scratching the surface. while we're not new to data, there is already a ton of data that exists in many of the buildings today that are actually not being leveraged. And so I would state one of the first challenges, so while there's an opportunity because there's so much data already available, one of the challenges the real estate industry has is most owners don't actually own the data, although they've purchased the system. So in many cases, they may not be able to access the data, or if they want to access the data, they may have to pay for it. And so one of the challenges that we hope to see over time and that we educate our clients on is that they really need to start revisiting the contracts they're signing with their building vendors to ensure they own and have access to the data, even if for whatever reason this organization disappears down the road. And so the great thing about the fact that there's already access to data, we certainly see great examples where clients, again, are starting with the low-hanging fruit. And many of us, even RYCOM just over 4 years ago, our focus was energy. And it's the one area that is the most quantifiable from a return and a savings and sustainability impact. But the opportunity, is energy is just one data source that's available to us. If we look at a building itself, there is so much data that exists from so many of the building systems and the people that are in it. And so the opportunity is really to how do we become creative and innovative that we can actually start to collect and stitch those data sets together to provide us with much greater context about what's happening in my property, what's going to happen in my property from a tenant and guest comfort and amenity perspective, from a security perspective, from a environmental perspective, and an operational savings perspective. So those are some of the great opportunities that exist. And for clients that are investing in platforms that are agnostic to the building system and data, they have a far better chance of success because they can ingest so many different types of data sets. Part of the challenge the industry has, and there's a couple, is many organizations or data platforms have focused solely on energy, and they're very siloed. They're not looking to step outside of energy. And so if you're looking to really create a holistic smart strategy and how to use data, if you're only focusing on one data set or one building system, it prevents you from looking at those other data sets coming in, or you potentially have to invest in other platforms that can look at other data sets. So Wi-Fi, metering, parking as an example. The other challenge that the industry has is, when I think back when RYCOM started just over 4 years ago, we did experience challenges with the building vendors because they did not want to open up the data sets to RYCOM. They felt threatened by RYCOM. They were now going to service these building systems or replace them. And it's actually not the case. As I mentioned, a smart strategy is really around collaboration and partnership. And what some of the building automation system vendors we worked on very early on started to realize was that we're actually here to work together and support them. We're here to provide data and context to give better direction and be proactive. And we were actually using data sets to prove that it was time to do upgrades. And so they were seeing an increase in their opportunities as well. But part of a fundamental issue that the real estate industry has is there are very specific building vendors that are not opening up their data sets.
Yeah, do you know, that never even really crossed my mind, the ownership of the data and then accessing that data.
Absolutely. And, how secure is this data? And where does it live? And so, the industry, if you don't have access to all the data sets, then you can't get a full, wholesome picture of what's happening in your environment. And the industry, to some extent, has really fancied themselves on these pretty dashboards. And don't get me wrong, dashboards are important, especially, information that's available to the clients. But we need to go a lot deeper, past the dashboard and get really deep into, the data source, the quality of the data, where does the data live, how is it accessed, and who owns it, and how is it protected? And so those are really all the different pieces we need to give consideration to. And then, yes, of course, let them roll up into a beautiful dashboard that people can look at, but also has meaning and depth to it.
Now, how does cybersecurity factor into all of this? You've touched on it already, but just interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I personally look at cybersecurity as the wrapping paper that really brings everything together. When we start thinking about, designing, installing, managing, how we manage access, how we manage data, there are definitely standards and best practices and policies that need to be put in place. And I would say what's interesting about the real estate industry is that, it's really been over the last few years, you've heard about cybersecurity, and it's, kind of created, a lot of talk and momentum in the industry. But as I mentioned earlier, it's been around for decades. I'll never forget, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, we had participated in a BOMA Toronto session around cyber. And I had invited a gentleman from CIBC to talk about their cyber practice. And some of the audience members said to me, I don't understand why you would invite somebody from CIBC to talk about cyber. And I said to them, the purpose of it is to demonstrate that cyber is not new. The real estate industry is not going to be a leader in cybersecurity. You're going to be a participant to the evolution of cyber and its policies. However, the industry has an opportunity to lean on another industry to understand what those best practices and learnings are. And so we don't make the same mistakes.
And you're not having to reinvent the wheel.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the industry's challenges as a whole is there isn't a willingness to step outside of our industry to see what others are doing. And yet when you look all around us, there is so much innovation and transformation and automation happening that we could actually be much further ahead if we're just willing to see what others are doing.
So in terms of the most out-of-the-box solution that you and your team have come up with recently, can you share a little bit about that?
I definitely can. I would say this probably maybe isn't as recent as you might be thinking, but so a few years ago, RYCOM had brought a platform from the United States into Canada that allowed us to leverage copper wiring in a building. And so if you think of a hotel or a long-term stay type facility, many of these properties wanted to bring Wi-Fi to their guests. However, they didn't have the money to go and rewire an entire building. So we found a technology that allowed us to use the existing infrastructure. So we were seeing some success in the Canadian market. What was really outside of the box or unique that you asked is we were actually contacted by a Cuban organization to come to Cuba, wire up one of their buildings, and they wanted to bring all of the top hotel owners of Cuba and the military to see what we were doing. And so myself and one of our engineers decided to head to Cuba in the middle of August, which is the dead of summer. And so I'm sitting in the airplane, and the pilot's about to shut the door, and I'm waiting for the engineer to show up, and he's not on the plane.
Oh, no.
And I thought to myself, what the heck am I going to do by myself in Cuba with these guys? Anyways, he ends up being the last person on. I mentioned it's August. He's wearing this big, heavy knit sweater, a leather jacket. He has some of the hardware under his arm, and he's just beads of sweat running down his forehead. I thought to myself, my God, what have I gotten myself into? And I don't know what's going to happen when we get there. So we arrive in Cuba. We got to the Melia Hotel, which is, a very well-known name. And that's the building that we're going to be setting up. So the night before, him and I complete the installation. We get the testing done. Like, we got it all figured out. There, nothing could possibly go wrong. So get up early in the morning, call him, let's go grab some breakfast. And he said to me, I'm just waiting for my shirt to show up. And I said, what do you mean? He brought one dress shirt.
No.
Since we arrived. And of course, that morning was the day that the laundry service misplaced his dress shirt. And so I had to go down and welcome everybody. So there was at least a couple dozen of the hotel chains and owners, along with the military, in this meeting room. And my teammate did not show up because his shirt had not arrived. And so I'm just buying time, asking questions, having some conversations. And then sure enough, he shows in. A big sigh of relief from my part. We did our official pitch. We go to light the building up, and nothing works. And again, I'm just thinking to myself, and I won't drop an F-bomb, but I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is going on? Like, this just does not make sense. So we're walking through some of the challenges you can experience in an installation. My counterpart is checking all the connectors to make sure everything is okay. And then we realized the internet was shut off. And so we had to tell them. And sure enough, the gentleman that was from the military put up his hand and said, oh yeah, I shut the internet off because I didn't want you guys to hurt yourself. So let me make a phone call. And sure enough, within a minute, the internet had come back on and our solution had worked.
My question to that is, was he wearing a shirt when he walked in the room?
The one shirt finally showed up.
That's too funny. So presumably, even with sophisticated software and elaborate hardware in the world, the people that run a smart building are of critical importance in its intelligence. So, in your experience, who is educating and training the people to learn the skills required?
That's a great question. I think that's one of the maybe myths I'd like to bust right now when it comes to data and people. There's this belief that as we leverage the use of data and how we operate, our buildings and our spaces, that there's going to be a loss of jobs. And although some, will, just through efficiencies and being able to automate some of those functions, will certainly displace some functions, it doesn't actually mean we're displacing people as a whole. And if anything else, it's actually created an enormous amount of job opportunities. I mean, let's take Uber as an example. Right? They completely revolutionized the way you and I, leverage a service to move from point A to point B. While they may initially have been looked as a taxi service, there are data scientists and developers and data people and cybersecurity people and network people that are all supporting an app that you and I use for its pure convenience to get somewhere. And so if we think about the real estate industry, data is just a part of it. Technology and networking is an important component. Cybersecurity is an important component. All of these, this innovation and transformation we're seeing in the industry is really going to drive new roles and capabilities within people. And so where do you get it from? And that's a great opportunity. So I'll use myself initially as the example. I actually don't have a technology background. I'm supposed to be a lawyer or a forensic analyst even before CSI became, a hot show many, many years ago. But there's a willingness to learn. And so, that's an important part. But there certainly are, some great college and university opportunities and education skills that can be learned. But also, working with an organization that's willing to sort of take you under the wing and help develop you, I think is another great way to step into this space.
Do you find, though, that there's sometimes a resistance, a fear of this smart technology?
Definitely. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a huge fear and just a huge sense of overwhelming. I mean, we talk to building owners and operators every day. They are constantly inundated with the newest piece of tech that has come out. And then we have, building teams that, how do you become an expert in every single building system that exists today and all the new stuff? They're more generalists than experts. And so, we're asking organizations to make decisions and spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, over the course of a property's life around technology and how are they equipped? And so how do we help people become more comfortable with technology, give some consideration to what might be possible, and then also give them the ability to become more experienced and capable of digging into what is the future functionality? What outcome might this drive for us? What's the tenant impact? The sustainability impact. And so this is really an education process. And if we look around the industry and the services that you guys offer, we're seeing many new types of roles being created in the real estate industry that really up until, I'd say 4 to 5 years ago, perhaps, didn't exist.
I completely agree with you. We're often being asked for job descriptions and salary ranges for these new jobs that are coming about, and there is no data there. They're brand new.
Correct. And I can share with you, even from a RYCOM, perspective, we have a number of opportunities. And in many cases, we know that we are going to have to go outside of the real estate industry to find people with some of the experience and skill set we're looking for, because our market is just not mature enough. So again, a willingness to step outside of our box to see what else might be available or possible.
Are you looking for a trusted recruiter who lives and breathes Canadian real estate? At Highview, we bring over 30 years of recruiting experience to help steer you in the right direction. We are passionate about your success in this industry and will always do our best to provide you with all the information so that you can make the best decision for your career. Contact Highview Partners today to discover how we can connect you to people who perform.
Now, how has real estate and technology strategies been working together during the COVID pandemic to help us recover, obviously economically, and encourage people to get back to work?
I think what's first very interesting, and I'd like to acknowledge, I think the pandemic was really, from my perspective, the first time I saw the industry come together and really collaborate on how to support our real estate industry. And so that's one thing that I would like to give accolades to the various organizations that have done that. I think the second thing is many organizations planned to embrace tech and data and people and process some way within their organizations. And I think the pandemic just helped speed up their process around that. So there was intentions, but this just expedited their delivery because of what had been thrown our way. But when I look at it from a tech perspective and how sites are encouraging and promoting back to work, I mean, there certainly are legislation that's preventing us from having everybody back, and so we have to work within those constraints. But we've actually seen a lot of clients, again, with a different approach about what do they believe is the right thing to do for their properties to welcome back their tenants and welcome back their guests. And so one of the areas we've seen is a lot of our clients are spending time implementing and monitoring and optimizing, like building ventilation, flushing, humidification, and filtration to minimize the transmission of the virus particles. One of the other areas we've seen is, although the buildings aren't fully occupied, the building systems still need to operate. And many of our clients' team members are not at full capacity, right? They've scaled back people attending the site. And so we've actually seen an increase for support and remote management of the networks and the building systems and even their telecom riser management systems. Because although people aren't in the building, they still need those building systems to function. We're actually seeing a lot of our clients investing in vibration sensors, believe it or not, especially in large buildings when it comes to chillers and air handling units, very expensive components within a properties that always don't have people in them. Many of them are past their lifetime. And so these are ways to help support and extend the life system. But, should there be an issue, they potentially might have to evacuate a property. And so, having that type of data and management has been really important for some of our clients. And, for many clients, it's really been around physical security. They want to take this opportunity to upgrade their access control systems, their security cameras, so they can welcome clients back, in a much more secure type of environment, for sure.
Canada's becoming a global hub for real estate technology and innovation, and there's a plethora of prop tech firms out there offering various solutions. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, we're definitely an organization that is passionate about technology, right, and innovation. And maybe I'll go back to what I shared earlier. There's no question there's a ton of new technology and prop tech firms coming out of the industry on a daily basis. And so, when there's so much coming in, we have, individuals that aren't in a position to actually, sort of sort through it all. What's the capability, feature, functionality, and true business return? Or they're not comfortable with technology. It potentially prevents organizations, from embracing something new. So, it's great that there's a lot of innovation. It's just how do we help the industry be in a position that they can absorb more of that? I would say, one of the other challenges is that our clients are sharing with us, and we see it ourselves, is some of these new solutions are half-baked. So they have a great concept. They've completed part of the development. And what ends up happening is our real estate clients end up spending a lot more time, effort, and money in helping to solidify the product and bring it further along. And so, we're big believers in, try and buy, start small, do 1 or 2 pilots and see what's capable, so you can really flush out what's the true outcome or problem that this solution is going to solve. What's the capability and responsiveness of this prop tech company? If you call for a service issue or have some challenges, is somebody returning your call? Can somebody actually show up? But also the reputation and longevity of this organization. We've seen a number of customers get stuck with technology that they've implemented with an organization that's since gone out of business. There's no one available to call. In some cases, they can't even crack the data and get into the data set that's there. And so there needs to be some consideration and thought to, yes, let's embrace technology and see what it's capable of. However, there are also some business risks that need to be discussed and figured out so we understand what we're stepping into.
So I have to ask you, you've been involved with so many different projects. What's the most exciting one that you've been involved with?
Yeah, I definitely have had the opportunity to participate in some very exciting projects, not necessarily as a result of, positive situations. So maybe the one I'll share with you was, there were a lot of unfortunate circumstances with when 9/11 had happened. And as devastating as it was, there was also a need for the global economy to figure out how they were going to get people back into the air and how we were going to get planes off of the ground. And so post 9/11, RYCOM, along with one of the government agencies and a couple other partners in Canada, we actually worked together on a solution to figure out how could we start to move low-risk air travelers and put them in planes in the air. And so a number of years ago, RYCOM was involved in a program called CanPass, which then became adopted by the US, and there's a partnership which is now called Nexus. And so for any of you pre-approved air travelers, RYCOM was a part of this program. And what was so exciting about this opportunity, despite what caused it, is that it was a great example of that methodology I shared earlier. How do we bring people, process, and technology together? How do we leverage technology, create a database of people's irises that are stored and are known to be low-risk travelers, and allow them to expedite, their time while they're in an airport and get them in the air? And so that was, from my perspective, an exciting opportunity to be a part of, because there's another great example of how using people, process, and technology, we fundamentally change the way people were able to travel. And that project alone spawned, a number of other exciting ones. For example, we then were invited to participate in a research project that allowed us to deal with and create a database of firearms and explosive liquids. And so if you think about, someone trying to bring a firearm or a component of a firearm and stick it in a luggage, we were working with X-ray machines and creating databases about components of a firearm. And if, for example, 3 people were traveling and each of them had a component of that firearm in their luggage, the luggage would go through the X-ray machine, and the data platform was able to determine that there was a piece of a weapon that was included, and very quickly determined that there was 3 pieces that, if put together, could actually had a potential of causing some problems. And so that just spawned a number of opportunities for us to get engaged in some really interesting projects around tech and data.
Very cool. Now, in terms of the future of building technology, what major advances do you think we'll see in the next 10 to 20 years?
That's really the question that everybody asks, right? Is what's next? When I think back over the years, and I even look at RYCOM's own backyard, there's been a number of innovative ideas and solutions we've brought to the marketplace that the market just wasn't ready for. And so, if I think about even, our industry and, how, the advancement of autonomous automobiles, and how connected we are to our phones and how we travel today, technology, data, and people have all allowed that, to move forward. And so if I think about what does the future of real estate look like in comparison to some of the other industries that we can look to today, there's no question in my mind that data is going to be one of the biggest contributors to how our industry moves forward, especially from an autonomous perspective. So again, people absolutely still having roles and new skill sets, but I think we're certainly going to start to see a lot more autonomous operations and automation as a whole. The technology of the building systems will continue to evolve and become far more technical and challenging. And so I think that's going to create a whole new wave of skill sets to move within our organization. And I think the other thing, or a couple other things, that is one, everyone talks about smart cities. In order to get to smart cities, we actually have to roll back. And so to be a contributor in a smart city environment, what is the capability of your building? So I think over the next 10 to 20 years, we need to see individual buildings implementing data technology solutions that will help them, operate more efficiently. Then they can be tied to properties within their portfolios to provide more visibility and data and operations. Then those buildings can be contributors to the communities that they are in. And then that's what really is going to expedite our ability from a smart city perspective. And what that's going to be coming, we'll see a lot more evolution in our cybersecurity policies and guidelines and strategies. And then if we look at what our clients are building today, so we see a lot more multi-use environments. So shopping centers, commercial property, and shorter long-term living. So we think about the communities. I think another area that's going to grow is that how are these multi-use spaces going to provide far more connectivity, amenity, and customization, whether I live, work, or play, or perhaps all three in that particular environment.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about these things. You're clearly really passionate and very excited about what you do. What is it you enjoy most about working in the real estate industry?
Yeah, I definitely am passionate about our space. And I would say, there's a few reasons why. One is I love the ability that our team can be contributors to this innovation and disruption that technology and data are having within the real estate industry, because it is constantly evolving. The second reason that I would say why I love this industry is I work with such an amazing group of people.
And that group of people think exactly the same about you.
Thank you so much. Their passion, their openness, their willingness to roll up their sleeves and jump in, even though we may not have everything figured out. I am just so grateful that I am able to work with these people, every single day. And, last but certainly not least is our clients. We have clients that, may not feel 100% comfortable with what we're talking about. They may not be 100% resolved. There's some trust and some risk associated with what is happening and what we're doing. And so the willingness of our clients to banter and share, and as I mentioned earlier, fail and succeed together is, another reason why it's such a great industry. And there are just so many experienced individuals that are willing to share and teach us as well.
I completely agree. So can I ask, Jennifer, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from prior mistakes?
Yeah, I definitely have a list of those. And I would say that I don't think it's ever going to end. So the first one I would say is that as any person, especially as a female, that I can be strong and vulnerable at the same time. I've also learned both in my professional and personal life that in the end, the only thing I can control is myself, how I show up and how I respond. And that's really important for me. Trusting my gut. Very early on in my RYCOM days, especially when I moved over to the real estate industry, there were so many unknowns, and I really felt that I needed to use data to make a decision. And over time, it was trusting my gut, and also, never giving up on something that I'm really passionate about. I've learned it's okay to ask for help and to lean on others. And I think, over the last year and a bit of COVID, that has proven itself to me in so many ways. The other thing, as far as growing and developing, is to really understand your true potential and live out, not to be comfortable. Like, you really do need to step outside of your comfort zone to see what you're really made of. I remember years ago, people told me never ask questions, especially to a client that you don't know the answer to. And I've taken a very different approach. I'm totally cool with asking tough questions. And although I may not like the answer that I'm going to get, at least I'm dealing with the truth versus a preconceived notion of what I think the truth is. And then by having the truth, I can then choose if I want to do something about it. Standing up for myself and others is really something that I've definitely learned along the way. And don't be afraid to try. If I think of the real estate industry and, all this tech and data innovation we talk about, and just in our personal life, if we don't try, we never know what might be possible. And the one question I ask myself, my boys, my team, is if we can live with the worst case scenario, then what's holding us back? And it's very rare that worst case scenario actually ever happens.
It's true.
Very much so. I think one of the mistakes that I've learned over the years is, surround yourself with people that are encouraging and supportive and really want you to achieve your full potential. You may have people in your personal life that provide that, and perhaps through the support of a mentor or some type of coach, having somebody that can be non-judgmental and neutral to you and really want to help you determine and figure out what's best about you and what you want to truly achieve. I think having a mentor or coach in your life would be crucial. I think also being open to ideas. I think early on in my career, I was very focused about what I needed to accomplish. And I said no to things, both personally and professionally. And what I've learned, over the last several years is being curious, and don't say no first. Give it some consideration. And if you're going to say no, then be resolved in that you've actually spent some time thinking about it. As people, I think we need to value who we are. And I think over the years, I didn't value myself the way I should have. And if I don't value who I am as a person, then how could I possibly expect other people to respect and value me as well? One of my biggest lessons learned for sure is, although may things not always go our way, and some things may be completely out of our control, I do believe in most circumstances, there's an opportunity or a learning or a gift that we can take from that failure. And I've had many failures in my life, both personally and professionally, but looking back, that is the one. And that is, a definite approach I take in anything I do or deal with in life today. And ultimately, when it comes to people in my personal and professional life, is forming my own opinion about who others are and really getting to know somebody.
Wonderful. So you're now on the BOMA Toronto board. So what was your motivation in joining the association, and what would you like to achieve?
Yes, I'm very fortunate. I became a board member this year for BOMA Toronto. And looking back over my career, when I joined the real estate arm of RYCOM back in 2009, I did become a BOMA Toronto member right away, as I had heard that there was a great association and organization to be a part of. And so when I look back at the course of my career, from a networking engagement, how I've grown in RYCOM, BOMA Toronto played a really important role in that. From a networking perspective, I've been invited over the years to participate in a number of educational series as a facilitator, and it's allowed me to connect with individuals that I may never have crossed paths with. And so, as I mentioned earlier about some reflection and how do I support and give back, I felt that, this year I want to take the opportunity to apply for the position, because I felt that after, over 10 years of being a BOMA Toronto member, that I wanted to contribute and give more of my time and help support our industry. And so one of the things I'd like to achieve, during my time at BOMA, and I'm very fortunate to, be working along with Susan and Nada and a number of other great, people from the industry, is helping to develop a mentorship program for our members.
That's amazing. And we've had a lot of the board members on as our guests, actually. So you're in good company. Now, you became a certified professional coactive coach last year. Congratulations. What impact has this had on both of, your professional and your personal life?
I had over 10 years ago, when I was being groomed for my new role at RYCOM, I actually had the opportunity to work with an exceptional coach. And it was such a great life, both personally and professional experience. I wanted to give that same opportunity. I wanted to give that back in some way. But to be frank, I was actually very afraid of going back to school. So that was something I had to overcome. And, when I think about the timing of it, and I did get certified last year, it was, just after COVID had happened. And, all of us, both from a professional and personal perspective, were impacted by COVID in a number of ways. RYCOM certainly was from a professional perspective. My family and I definitely were from a personal side. So for me last year, getting my certification was really ideal. We were all dealing with a lot of personal and professional challenges, and, my family certainly was exempt from that. And what it really allowed me to do was, while there was so much uncertainty and fear and unknowns, I could certainly acknowledge how I was feeling. However, I was able to take a lot of the tools and learnings that I had to help support my family and push it forward. I felt that I was able to show up as a team member and as part of the management team at RYCOM to make some very difficult decisions around how do we protect our people, how do we protect our clients, how do we protect, the business as a whole. And really, in that also, I still had a number of, young professional clients from the real estate industry. From a coaching perspective, I was still working with. And so how was I able to support them? And just as a person, support people in general, because everybody was struggling and so challenged with it. And so those tools as a coach really allowed me, I feel, to help support myself and everyone else, because we were all really leaning on each other.
Well, it sounds to me that your decision to become a coach has been really valuable in helping motivate and empower a lot of people in your inner circle. So lucky them, and congratulations on doing that. Because honestly, Jennifer, in my opinion, you are an absolute rock star. I've loved having you join me today. It's honestly, for me, been one of the most interesting and impactful episodes that I've done. I've learned so much from your insights in this particular space. So thank you so much. And this obviously brings me to my final question. We do like to ask our guests to end by sharing some advice for those that are currently listening, and share some tidbits and suggestions that you might have for somebody who's wanting a career in real estate building technology.
When we think about, real estate around building technology, the roles are endless. You can look at it specifically from a tech perspective, a data perspective, an engineer, data scientist, and yet organizations need more than that. They need marketing people. They need salespeople. They need finance people. HR plays an enormous role in this space right now because we're creating and looking to onboard so many new types of skill sets. So I would say that there's so much opportunity within the real estate industry, and specifically around technology and data. And so it's really thinking about, what is of interest, to you in that particular space. What are you passionate about? What are maybe some roles people have or individuals that you're really interested in, and connect with them. Ask them for their time. It's an opportunity to learn about it. Certainly attending networking and industry events is a great way to connect. There's so many educational series that are available for people to learn about the industry and technologies and learn about the different roles. Both the college and university level are offering so many different types of programs, and that's actually being revamped as we speak. Our owner, Casey, along with a number of others in the industry, are working with college and universities to design new programs, to create incentive to bring people into the industry so they're more prepared. As I mentioned earlier, seek a mentor that can provide some guidance in this space and perhaps can direct you. Many organizations also offer some type of internship program that you might want to consider applying for early on. I think there also needs to be, from a personal perspective, this innate willingness to try and learn and ask questions. And if I think of myself going back, a few decades, this wasn't a space I was familiar with, but there was always a willingness to learn and ask questions and not be afraid to.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.